Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to embark on a pretty wild journey to uncover, honestly, the greatest financial illusion that you and I participate in every single day. If you've ever stopped to wonder how the global financial engine actually turns, or why the value of the dollars, pounds, or euros in your pocket seems to just constantly shift around, well, you are in exactly the right place. We are going to completely break down the complex architecture of debt that literally runs our world, step by step.
So let's just dive right into this by challenging a really fundamental assumption you probably hold about the cash sitting in your wallet right now. Think about it. What is money, really? When you picture it, you likely think of a physical object, right? A crisp paper bill, a heavy gold coin, something that holds inherent, unchangeable value. We're taught to treat money as this tangible law of nature, but to really grasp how modern economics works, we have to totally strip away that misconception. We need to look past the paper and the metal to understand what's actually going on beneath the surface.
Because here is the crazy part. Money isn't a physical object with intrinsic value at all. Actually, scratch that. It's entirely a social agreement. It's a carefully constructed architecture of debt. To really get this, we just need to look back at the historical story of Yap Island. The people of Yap used rye stones as their currency. These were giant, unmovable limestone wheels. They were so incredibly massive that they couldn't even be physically handed over during a trade. In fact, one of their most valuable stones actually sank to the bottom of the ocean during a storm. And you know what? The islanders just kept trading it anyway. Imagine buying your groceries with a rock sitting at the bottom of the sea. The physical stone didn't matter. The agreement did. Money, at its very core, is simply a shared ledger of who owes what to whom.
All right, part one, debunking the barter myth.
You know that textbook story you learned in school, the one about primitive humans awkwardly trying to trade 3 chickens for a pair of shoes, and eventually getting so frustrated they invented coins to save the headache? Well, anthropological evidence completely flips the script on that. Historians and anthropologists have found practically zero evidence of pure barter economies. None. The reality is that complex systems of credit and debt existed way before the very first coin was ever minted. People simply kept track of favors and promises. So debt actually birthed money, not the other way around.
Which brings us to part two, the evolution of deception. Let's trace how this grand illusion evolved over time, moving from ancient experiments all the way to the birth of banking as we know it today. We'll start in the East with the Song Dynasty, move over to the cobblestone streets of 17th century London, and finally land right here in the digital ledgers of our modern era. Each era represents a more sophisticated way of organizing and ultimately expanding debt. First up, the Chinese Song Dynasty. These guys were true pioneers of paper currency. They tried to detach exchange from those heavy strings of metal coins, but it ended up becoming a huge cautionary tale. The temptation for the government to simply print more paper promises to fund wars and expenses, it just became way too great. That led to massive inflation and the eventual collapse of that specific financial system. It was the world's first major warning about what happens when the architecture of debt grows faster than the reality it represents.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, because it brings us to the ingenious trick pulled centuries later by the 17th century London goldsmiths. This is the moment everything changes. Step 1. Citizens pay goldsmiths to securely store their physical gold. Makes sense, right? Step 2. The goldsmiths hand out convenient paper receipts, which people start trading instead of lugging around the heavy metal itself. But step 3. This is where the absolute magic, or maybe mischief, happens. The goldsmiths realized that almost no one ever came to claim their gold all at once, so they just started secretly printing extra receipts for gold that didn't actually exist, and they lent them out to collect interest. Just like that, out of thin air, fractional reserve banking was born. They weren't managing wealth anymore. They were literally creating money by expanding debt.
Moving right along to part three, the modern banking reveal. Fast forward to today, and if you look closely, modern central banks operate on the exact same principles as those early London goldsmiths. Sure, the technology got a major upgrade from a printing press and a quill pen to sophisticated computer algorithms, but the underlying mechanical architecture, creating circulating currency through the issuing of debt, is absolutely identical. Here is the nuts and bolts reality of our financial system right now. The vast majority of money today isn't paper. It consists of digital entries on a ledger. Banks lend out significantly more money than they hold in physical reserves, which means the overall money supply in our society continuously expands based on systemic debt. When a bank issues you a loan, they aren't reaching into some dusty vault and handing you someone else's savings. No way. They are just typing digits into a computer, legally creating new money out of your promise to pay it back. The debt literally is the money. And that leads us to our final section, part 4, the true cost of inflation. Whenever the money supply expands faster than actual economic output, we get inflation. Let's break down who actually wins here. For the everyday saver, the person diligently putting money away in a bank account, inflation acts as a silent tax. Your purchasing power just steadily drops over time. But for the massive government borrower, the entity holding staggering amounts of national debt, the real value of what they owe mathematically shrinks. They get to pay back yesterday's debts with tomorrow's cheaper dollars. It's a system that inherently penalizes the holder of the currency and mathematically rewards the biggest borrowers in the room.
So get this, inflation is not a mistake. It's not some random glitch in the matrix. It is the intended, natural consequence of an architecture built entirely on debt. If the system stops expanding, the debt simply cannot be serviced. The continuous, gradual devaluation of currency is a required mechanism. It's literally designed to keep the grand illusion moving forward without collapsing under its own weight.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really provocative question to think about. We go to work, right? We trade our most finite resource, our time and our energy, for this currency. But if that money is truly just an evolving illusion of debt, governed by rules that constantly dilute its value to sustain the system, who are you really lending your life's time to? Keep exploring, keep questioning the structures around you, and hey, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the architecture of debt.